Hey guys, Brooks here, First Baptist Church of the Islands. Hope you're doing well. I don't know what it is, but man, I gotta quit choosing the hottest part of the day to do some of these 5 for 5 videos. I don't know, man. Maybe I need to pray for wisdom, I guess, a little more than normal. But behind me is Fort Pulaski. A lot of you recognize this. This is a landmark, not just here in our area, but nationally as well. And there's a lot of history in this building behind me. Built in the 1840s. It only endured one battle during the Civil War, and that was just for 2 days in 1862. And you know the outcome. It didn't end well for Fort Pulaski, nor the soldiers on the inside of it as well. And yet this building behind me, when you look at it from the outside, is incredibly fortified. I mean, 25 million bricks. It cost about $1 million to build it back in the mid-1800s. And the wall that you see behind me on the outside goes up to about 32 feet high. Now, it reminds me of another wall that I read about today in my quiet time. I'm going through the book of Nehemiah for my D group, my discipleship group, and Nehemiah is one of my favorite books of scripture. And in the book of Nehemiah, what basically happens is that Nehemiah, who's just an average person, worked for the government out of town. He came back to Jerusalem when he heard that the city wall was torn down. That was not good in those days because their identity and their protection was linked in a lot of ways to having that wall around the city of Jerusalem. And so Nehemiah received permission from the king. He came back to town, and in 52 days, long story short, 52 days, facing a ton of opposition, he and the people of Jerusalem were able to build that city wall back in place again. And it would have been a structure that would have been, it would have been significant. Maybe not 32 feet high, but it would have been significant. Well, there's a passage in Scripture in Nehemiah chapter 6 where he is facing some opposition. And I love this passage, and I'll tell you why it stood out to me. And it's going to come from a few individuals specifically who were not in favor of seeing this wall rebuilt. And they came to Nehemiah. Their plan was to ultimately try to get him away from the work so that they could murder him, or if not that, at least maybe attack the city with him gone. And in chapter 6, they offer an invitation to him. And listen to what it says. It's in Nehemiah chapter 6, beginning in verse 2, it says that Sanballat and Geshem, these were two of the enemies, sent him a message saying, "Come, let us meet together at Shepharim in the plain of Ono." But they were planning to harm me. Well, that invitation would have pulled him about 20 miles outside of the city. And look at what Nehemiah's response was. I love this, man. In chapter 6, verse 3, he says, "So I sent messengers to them." He didn't go himself. "I sent messengers to them saying, I am doing a great work and I cannot come down. Why should the work stop while I leave it and come down to you?" And man, I love that response, because what Nehemiah is saying is, I'm engaged in something that is of the highest significance. And I'm not going to leave it, and I'm not going to reprioritize it just so that I can come meet with you. Nehemiah knew what he was called to, and he knew what was most important. And it makes me think, and this is what I thought through a little bit this morning during my time with the Lord. I began to think through, so what are some of the good works that God's called me to that I can't afford to put down or be distracted from? Well, one of those is being a husband to my wife, Susie, and a dad to Hannah, Drew, and April. Another is being a ministry leader through First Baptist Church of the Islands. Some of the other priorities really that God has called me to is to become a follower of Jesus and to walk closely with him, to share the message of the gospel. Some of those things I do well at guarding, others I don't. But God's called me to those things, and I wonder maybe for you, what are some of the things that he's called you to? What are some of the good works that God has called you to that you can't afford to put down, and maybe that you have been lately and you need to come back to? You know, Nehemiah got it right. And the good thing is that by God's grace, he gives us an opportunity to get it right as well. You probably don't have a wall like this behind you at your house or around your life, but maybe you need to build some of those walls. That walls that will help you to keep the main thing, as they say, to keep Christ first and invest in those things that matter most, starting with your own family, and doing the things that are going to impact eternity, like sharing Jesus, loving others, and making disciples. Maybe you want to make yourself a little list like that today. It'll probably only take about a minute. And then keep those things as priorities. And don't let anything pull you away, no matter how enticing it may sound. You have a great day today.